I want to take a minute to go over the features and navigation on the new Pearl player. First of all, on the right side of the player, there are two recessed buttons. The top one is for a small LED flashlight, and the bottom one is the power button for the player. Press and hold the power button for about a second and the player will turn on. Same press on the power button will turn it off again. Once the player is booted up, you'll see that the name of the current file is always displayed right in the middle of the screen. The play button is right here in the center. Simply press it and the player will start to play that current file. Press the button again to pause the player. Now the time counter will appear at the top left here to track where you are as you listen. The Pearl player has 4 levels of navigation. The top level is language, and this language button will scroll through the different languages on the player. You can see the first 3 letters of the language stay displayed right up here. Now inside every language is at least one folder. So on this particular player we have the English language with 3 folders: Old Testament, New Testament, and Stories. Then as a second language we have Spanish with New Testament and Stories. So language, folders, and then books is the third level of navigation. These 2 buttons will take you forward and backward through the books of the Bible, or perhaps the next set of lessons or stories, etc. And lastly, these 2 buttons move you forward and backwards by the chapter in the Bible. So language, folder, book, and chapter. Then we have volume buttons, and the volume is displayed temporarily in place of the battery status up here. And while I'm mentioning this, if you do a quick press on the power button while the player is turned on, the actual percentage of the battery charge will display for a moment right up here as well. And then these buttons allow you to skip forward and backward about 15 seconds in either direction. So that's the navigation of the player. There's one more button I have not yet mentioned. It is the top left button with 3 dots on it. This button switches between the 3 different sources for the audio player. The first source is the internal memory of the player. That is the content that comes loaded on the player. In this case, it's English and Spanish. The second source would be a micro SD that can be inserted into this slot right here. This particular micro SD has the Portuguese New Testament loaded into it. So once it is inserted, pressing this button will allow the player to access that content. And here is the Portuguese New Testament. Now the audio files that go onto the micro SD do have to be prepared and structured in a certain way for the player to read them properly, so please reach out to us for help with this. The third source is a built-in FM radio receiver. In order to use the FM radio on the Pearl player, a set of earbuds needs to be plugged into the headphone jack to serve as an antenna for the radio. The Pearl player does have a solar panel on the back to charge the player. And for best results, the player needs to be in direct sunlight. Although it will charge on a cloudy day, it will take considerably longer. In direct full sun, the Pearl should fully charge in 8 to 10 hours. There's also a micro USB charging port here next to the other ports, so you can charge the player in that way as well. By the way, the Pearl player does ship with a micro USB charging cable for your convenience. We're going to press that power button for 1 second again to turn the player off, and that will wrap up this instructional video on the Pearl player. Thanks for watching.